Welcome to The Way Left. I'm your host, Brian Vitello, and this podcast is January 6th, Pardoning Insurrectionists, Traitors, and Felons. So before I get started with that podcast, I just wanted to give a little marketing update. You can follow me on YouTube, also have a YouTube channel at The Way Left BV. That's The Way Left with Brian Vitello on YouTube. Everything's posted on there. But right now I am on X, at The Way Left BV. I'm also on Mastodon, which is another social network, a little less of the right-wing troll type, a lot less than X, at The Way Left BV. That's at The Way Left, B as in boy, V as in Vitello, my last name. And I'm also on Blue Sky, again, at The Way Left BV. So follow me on those. Also, like to mention that I have a website called thewayleft.com. You will find on that website the podcasts. All podcasts are on there, free, no subscriptions. You will also find on there recommendations for reading, books that I recommend, that I've read, that I think are insightful. I will update that as I move along. Read anywhere between 4 and 6 books, probably every month and a half, that are relevant to politics and knowledge and ideology and history. Also, there'll be some fun books on there. I read a lot of sci-fi, a lot of things like that. Under recommendations, you will also find what to watch. So one of those is what are you reading, which is the books. What are you watching, which shows, documentaries, things like that. And then what are you listening to? Podcasts. Obviously, if you're listening to this one, you've already done one podcast and you could be listening to this on YouTube. Reminder that on YouTube and on Spotify, these are in video. I also link some videos on my X account, some of the shorts that I do that are taken from what they call magic clips that are taken from these podcasts. I'll post those invariably on X, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. And those shorts are also out on Spotify is a little link within the video, and then shorts are out there under YouTube. So you can see both of those. And they're also on my website under podcasts, not the shorts, but the long versions of the podcast that gets posted to Spotify and YouTube. And then I have what are you listening to, like I mentioned before. And what are you listening to is a bunch of different podcasts. Not all of them I listen to. Like I don't listen to Joe Rogan much, but I make some comments in there. A lot of different podcasts, a lot of things, some of them of which I don't recommend, but I know that people are listening to. So go to those. Those are good sources. Listen to them. Don't listen to them. I think the most important is what are you reading? Read some books. It's very important for fun, for knowledge, for falling asleep. Books are good. And so is listening, and so is watching. But I always recommend books first. I think it's the easiest way to get your brain moving forward. Gives you insight into people you believe in, you don't believe in. So you should read a variety of books on all topics. One thing that we should all do, kids to adults, is read. Try to read, 6 books a year. Make 5 of them fun and 1 of them historical. And even historical fiction is good, like Lincoln by Gore Vidal, which is a fiction book, but it's an excellent book and has a lot of historical context with Lincoln's presidency. There's a lot of really good books out there and tons of good sci-fi, and I'm sure there's good fantasy and dramas and, B-rated porn books. I don't read those, but I know they're out there. So I wanted to mention that. I want people to go out there and do that. Eventually, the website will be more. I also have a blog on there, which right now it's not really a blog. It's more of insightful speeches, things I recommend, such as Tear Down the Wall, the speech by Ronald Reagan, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream. There's things on Lincoln and Harriet Tubman out there. There's a lot of good little quotes and things that I think you could look at. Eventually, the blog will be more of, if that comes through, maybe that will come through a regular blog or a blog through the website, which will go into, thoughts or articles that I think are good that might also fall under what are you reading or what are you listening to or what are you watching. So good information out there. Use that information. There's also a contact page. You can always email me, good or bad. I get emails. And then, if you're on YouTube or you're on Spotify and you like the show, definitely follow. If you have comments, plus or minus, make them. I love it. The more people that are giving back, the more that I can add. So that being said, we're going to move into this January 6th, pardoning insurrectionists, traitors, and felons. So let's go back to January 6th, 2021. It's post-election. Biden has won legally. Trump holds a rally outside the House of outside the Congress, where they're going to validate the vote, which is run by the Vice President Mike Pence, per the legal order for doing so. Trump runs a rally, which is supported by people like Charlie Kirk, who sent busloads of people in, supported by people like the Oath Keepers, which we'll talk about, the Proud Boys. And he had a speech. Fact is, he incited an insurrection. So if we think about insurrectionists and traitors and felons, we think about people that are doing things illegal. When we specifically talk about insurrectionists and traitors, we think about people that send espionage to other countries. Or we think about people like Benedict Arnold. And if you're religious, and I'm not, you think about people like Judas. You think about individuals who are trying to do something illegally, in this case, to uproot democracy. Donald Trump was the leader of that. Josh Hawley walked in and rose his fist as if this was a great thing. Now, the right to protest is the right to protest. It's part of the Bill of Rights. It's part of the definition of liberalism. And as you'll see at the end of my podcast, I have a screen that shows you what liberalism is defined as. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, secularism, separation of church and state, pluralism, allowed to believe in whatever the hell you want to believe. As long as you're not doing what? As long as you're not inciting insurrection. You're not a traitor to the United States. The point being here is people think outside this country that people like me or other people that are on the left or right hate this country. Actually, I think most people love this country. We end up hating each other. I don't hate anybody. Hate's a four-letter word for a reason. I say the other four-letter words. I love this country. But I do not put up with people that try to break democracy. And as I talked about, we do need updates to our Constitution, and it is a living document. And we should be making changes to handle a lot of these changes. It's not a tome. It's not the Bible. You can make changes to it. That's the point. As we evolve in our political persuasions, in our political ideologies, in our geography, and in our ethnicity, and the people that are part of this country. So, January 6th, okay? Share some pictures here. So if you're listening, these are going to be pictures of the insurrection. There are representatives from the right that said, this just looked like a visit. So you're allowed to visit Congress and the White House. Now, you have to go through an orderly thing. You have to be security checked. In some cases, you have to be approved to go in if you're part of a delegation or from another country. But we had representatives saying, this just looked like a visit, like a normal visit to Congress. Now, remember that Donald Trump held up the National Guard for 2 hours while this was going on. He sends the National Guard out all over the country to blue states to prosecute and chase down some illegal immigrants and just some random people that have dark skin or argue with ICE and don't allow them for the rights. So for those listening, these pictures will show you this doesn't look like a field trip for adults to Congress. It looks like an insurrection. Not everybody there. Some people were there to protest. Get it. They supported Trump. Whether or not they believe that the election was stolen, that's of not consequence, as long as they're not bordering on insurrection or being a traitor or violating the laws surrounding our government institutions and our government buildings in Washington, D.C. Clearly, it was not a holiday trip or a day trip, field trip for these people. So you're not missing much, but I beg you to go out and look at pictures of that day. And you tell me what you think, right or left. Tell me what you think. Is this a day trip, a field trip? To say, hey, we're unhappy with our Congress were unhappy with the decision, or was this relative to an insurrection? What I will say, too, is what do we do to insurrectionists in the past? Now, I'm not advocating for the harshness that we had in the past, but at a minimum, they should be serving hard time. And we'll talk about the pardoning of felons, insurrectionists, right-wing extremist groups. Okay, so I'm going to share a few shots here so you can enjoy the wonderful field trip that these people were on. Okay, so this picture I'm showing you is people pushing over fences against police. So people would say, well, why are the police there? Why? There's always police. There's always security around the White House. Of course there is, because there's a lot of humans out there that may choose to do bad things. This doesn't look like a field trip. This doesn't look like a celebration. They're pushing over the gates onto the cops. Now, if that was ICE, they'd shoot you, or they'd tear gas you, or pepper spray you, or wrap you up and throw you in jail and send you to a gulag in El Salvador. But they didn't do that. Let's go to another picture that we have here. And for those on audio, again, I beg you to look up these pictures and tell me if it's an insurrection or what you feel is a day trip. We have people climbing the walls. Some people would say, well, that's because they weren't let in. No, they were let in because they pushed over the barriers. They knocked over cops. They beat up cops. They beat up security. They're crawling up the walls. These are insurrectionists. These are traitors. Are they at the level of a military force? No. But they are associated with right-wing extremist militias, probably most of which are Fuentes Gropers, that also followed Charlie Kirk, climbing the walls to dispute a legal election that Donald Trump still cannot confess to, and a lot of Republicans can't confess to, and of course the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys can't confess to. Fox got sued for $787 million and lost because they disputed it. Maria Bartiromo and Tucker Carlson got fired because of it. So this isn't a right or left issue. This is a factual issue. These people were breaking the law, whether you want to call them insurrectionists, misdemeanors, or felons. And believe me, if ICE was there, I can only imagine these people would be in a gulag in El Salvador. And maybe in this case, no, it's never rightfully so. We don't send people to gulags. And then my last picture, which I think you'll really enjoy. Now, again, remember that we have representatives, Republican representatives, saying that this was just a trip. They were visiting the Capitol, expressing their right to protest, which I agree with. You have a right to protest. You do not have a right to violence. So let's go to this one. So for those on audio, there is a hangman set up with a noose, with the person standing there getting their picture taken while holding the noose. So I'm sure that's a great thing. We should bring those to all our field trips. What does that represent? They wanted to hang Mike Pence. They brought zip ties. They brought heavy body armor. They brought pipe bombs. So if you don't define that as felonious activity, then you live in a strange world, right or left. And you deserve to pay a price for that at some level. So, great picture here. This signifies what that was about. This signifies why Charlie Kirk, why the Oath Keepers, why the Proud Boys, why Donald Trump, why Josh Hawley loved this. Make Pence do something illegal and not certify the election. But Mike Pence, who I'm not a big fan of, but was a big fan on this day, one of the things I'm a fan of is that he fought for democracy. He did not succumb to the insurrectionists and traitors. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture. Again, for those of you that are on audio, this will be a picture of the No Kings that I went to. Now, I'm not saying that at every protest that I would attend that there isn't disruption or violence. There clearly wasn't in this latest one, where 7 million people came out to protest against the autocracy, the dictatorship, the grift, the kleptocracy of the Trump presidency, and of the notion that we can pretend to erase history with pardoning insurrectionists, traitors, and felons. For those of you who haven't read the book 1984 by George Orwell, essentially, for those of us that support liberalism and democracy, it is a book that shows you what not to do. I believe that a lot of people that are the ideologues, like J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's not an ideologue, he's not intelligent enough to be an ideologue, but he follows along with the Project 2025 ideology of Christian ideological authoritarianism. So the playbook is 1984. What we want to do is rewrite history. It's where 2 + 2 = 5 comes from. If you say it enough, you believe it. That's where Donald Trump's ideology comes in. I'll lie as much as I want. And if I keep repeating it, which is a Mussolini tactic, then people will believe it, especially those listening to podcasts like Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, Megyn Kelly, Mark Levin, Alex Jones. Alex Jones, that's his mantra. Of course, he got sued for $1 billion for lying about Sandy Hook, for libel. So you do have freedom of speech, but when you lie, when you do things that are against the law, like yelling fire in a theater when there's no fire in the theater, that's libel. That's illegal. Okay, so let's show this picture. This is a good one. I took this. I attended the No Kings protest. I met a lot of wonderful people there. Now, this is at the state capitol. What I don't see is nooses. What I don't see is battle armor, pipe bombs. What I don't see is people climbing the walls of the Capitol. Big difference. Now, Trump created videos to shit on these people. Literally, AI videos shitting on Americans. That tells you where we're at. And if people think I'm crazy about that, well, my next podcast episode will be about Trump derangement syndrome. Who's deranged? Okay. So here we are. January 6th is over. It will be 5 years coming up. Now, the right celebrates it as the right to protest. And currently, Trump's new administration, what he's done is the 1984 George Orwell book, Rewrite the Past. He's pardoning insurrectionists. He's pardoning traitors who were, through the legal system, put in jail. He is also turning the screws on what he considers left-wing extremism. But if we look at extremism over the last 30 years, the biggest percentage, now, of course, FBI and CIA took this off their website, has been mostly right-wing extremism in terms of violence. That's neither here nor there. Extremism is extremism. If Antifa kills 10 people, they all go to jail. If Antifa has an insurrection, they should go to jail. But I guess if you're part of the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, the Gropers with Nick Fuentes, or Charlie Kirk's army of Christians that provide access to create an insurrection, we pardon them. We rewrite history. The election was stolen. Sounds a lot like QAnon. Of course, QAnon, they don't talk about as much because QAnon used to say that there was a left-wing conspiracy lizard people that were pedophiles that were taking advantage of children and eating and killing children. Funny, that doesn't come up as much anymore because what we're realizing is maybe now the lizards and eating people is out there, not there, but maybe QAnon is exactly who others elected, Donald Trump. and his crew, which included some Democrats. So anyway, that's a side note. Okay. So let's see. First, let's start with Antifa. So Antifa is this left-wing terrorist organization, according to your friend and mine, the guy who's lost his soul, Marco Rubio, who said in the past that if you're on Trump's side, you're going to regret it. Now he's on Trump's side because the Adelson family from Las Vegas funded him. A neocon who's not really a neocon anymore. A neocon would be a neoconservative who says, I want to do actions against other countries when I deem it to be correct. There's a lot of other bases for that. I'm not going to deep dive on that. Anyway, Trump signs order targeting Antifa as a terrorist organization. Not the Proud Boys, not the Oath Keepers, which we'll go into, not the people that were part of the insurrection, which now is not an insurrection, but Antifa. So what does Antifa stand for? Anti-fascist. Now, if you study it, they don't really have a well organized group. There are people that are part of Antifa. Are they terrorists? There are people part of Oath Keepers and Proud Boys that are not terrorists. But are they a terrorist organization? So he wants to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle any and all illegal operations. I'm for that. Let's investigate, disrupt, and dismantle any and all illegal operations for anything that's illegal. So let me give you an example, because we're going to talk about ICE. Let's talk about immigration. So the people that are getting the job, they're chasing the people that are getting the jobs, right? So illegal immigrants. Guess who I would chase? So what Trump is saying here is, I'm going to target terrorist organizations. He deems Antifa a terror organization. I disagree with him. But he is going to go to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle all illegal operations. I agree with that part. So when we go get the organization and we find that they have illegal operations, yes, we can prosecute people within that organization and disband that organization if necessary. So think about immigration. Instead of going after the companies, so this is a proper immigration reform. What we do for immigration reform is we go and we investigate the companies that are signing and employing what? Illegal immigrants. So if I go to Monsanto, who's a big ag, and they have 100 illegal immigrants, and I see that they have them, whether they knew it or not, they've hired these people, which means they didn't have proper hiring procedures. You should not be hiring illegal immigrants. I agree. Because you have to properly vet them. That's an HR job. It's a legal job. Then what I do is I fine you for every person. So let's say it's 10 grand per person. And I do it ongoing. And I'm going to investigate you like an IRS audit ongoing. That's the way I solve the problem. So Trump is actually doing something here that makes sense. Investigate, disrupt, and dismantle any and all legal operations. That is a democratic principle that you should apply across the board. What you can't do is just, hey, we're going to pick this person, we're going to pick this person. In this case, he picks Antifa, but of course, Antifa is not the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. If he had said signs order targeting terrorist organizations, i.e., Antifa, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, white supremacist groups like the KKK, if they still exist, sure, I would disagree with Antifa as a terrorist organization compared to the others, but fine. And then disrupt and dismantle any and all legal operations, I'm on board. As long as we're doing that with due process, which we're not doing with immigration. Due process means you have a right to some sort of jury or trial to say that you're guilty instead of shipping you off to a gulag in El Salvador. But that's not what he's doing here. He's picking Antifa on purpose because it's a political means. The left is murder, as Elon Musk says. Huh. That's funny. I didn't see a lot of Antifa terrorists at the insurrection. Oh, that's right, because they were okay with the election stolen. Bullshit. So that's Antifa. And his attack on him, he's not pardoning them, he's going after him. Again, illegal operations, I'm good with. Let's go on to Proud Boys. So these group of neo-fascist white nationalist organization established in the United States in 2016. Okay? The group's members were noted for their misogynistic and anti-Semitic rhetoric, QAnon-related beliefs, their support for the ass clown, the orange ass clown, and their propensity for street violence. Proud Boys leader admits to hypocritical MAGA effort. An eye for an eye. Enrico Tarrio, the head of the Proud Boys, who was going to go to jail, and of course was pardoned, said that he was helped launch an extremely effective campaign to fire people, celebrating the assassination of a conservative activist, Charlie Kirk. You know, if you are celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination and I'm your employer, I'm probably going to let you go. But of course, he doesn't talk about what they did. This is the head of Proud Boys. So I'm in a different mindset right now, Tarrio said. An eye for an eye right now. This guy was sentenced to 22 years in prison in 2023, but was later pardoned by guess who? The orange ass clown, when he returned to the White House. He says, I was incarcerated for something I didn't do. Tarrio is referencing his seditious conspiracy conviction by a court and the rule of law, but he was pardoned. And this guy's on the streets, and they're not part of the terrorist organizations. Oath Keepers. Now, these guys are a swell group. One of the leaders of it has an eye patch. He might have been a veteran. Sure. His name is Stuart Rhodes, Oath Keepers founder, white supremacist, anti-Semitic. Now he wants to volunteer to help ICE. He says he announces militias relaunch to enforce Trump's orders. So we have a private group of insurrectionists who have been pardoned by the insurrectionist orange ass clown, and now he's going to help ICE incarcerate people and send them to a gulag in El Salvador. He says we're facing an ongoing invasion of this country. The militia is all of us. This is Rhodes, who was convicted in 2023 for his role in organizing and carrying out the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. But he was among the nearly 1,500 participants who were convicted. Again, not everybody there was a traitor or insurrectionist climbing the walls and illegally doing what they were doing. He was pardoned with the other 1,500 participants. This is a fucking dog whistle. White supremacy, white power, Christian authoritarianism, Project 2025. This is what we got. This is all written. They were convicted by their peers. They got due process. ICE does not do due process. Round you up, send you away. Oh, whoops, we screwed up, but we can't get you back. You're in a gulag in El Salvador with an authoritarian right-wing president. Makes a lot of sense. January 6th pardons. President Trump issued pardons for 1,500 defendants who participated in the siege on the U.S. Capitol 4 years ago, including the leader of a far-right group, fulfilling a campaign promise to exercise executive clemency on behalf of people he calls patriots and hostages. So our president, the orange ass clown, thinks insurrection traitors that were convicted by our court system are patriots and hostages, and Antifa is a terrorist organization, and the left is murder. I don't know, if you go back and read Mussolini and Hitler, I mean, we know what Hitler did to the Jews, but he also did it to gypsies, anybody that wasn't Aryan, blacks. If you go back to Mussolini, who said you just keep repeating the same shit over and over, becomes a fascist, knows that his people are influenced. So Rhodes and Tarrio were released along with 1,498 people. Rhodes was sentenced to 18 years, and Tarrio was sentenced to 22 years It's okay. Sweeping pardons for rioters. There were 140 police officers injured. God, that just sound when we go visit a museum, it's just like that. I mean, what we do is we just run rampage all over people. We shit on stuff. We break into people's offices. That's just visiting the White House. During the trial, Mr. Rhodes, part of the Oath Keepers, which is not a terrorist organization, not a right-wing terror organization, not according to the Orange Ass Clown, said at his jury, we aren't getting through this without a civil war, and the final defense is on us and our rifles. We pardon that guy. Tario, who was not present at the Capitol that day, but he encouraged the violence by posting on social media, which is delineated, and he was convicted by his peers. Now, he wouldn't consider him his peers because his peers only agree with violence, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, misogyny. Proud of my boys and my country, and don't fucking leave. Following day, January 7th told some of his members that he was proud of them. He was proud of the insurrectionists. He was proud to fight against the rule of law. So what we're also finding is Trump is pardoning these people. He's actually pardoned a guy a second time who was an insurrectionist who got out and then committed a felony, and then he pardoned him again. So some of these people were already felons before they got part of the insurrection. Shockingly, people that want to be insurrectionists and traitors based on false premises, false. This isn't taxation without representation from 1700s when we had the revolution. That was based on a true premise that we didn't have a vote. These are based on false premises, narratives, QAnon conspiracies. Trump, just to bring up another guy, he pardoned George Santos, the representative, the crazy representative, who basically had felony wire fraud and aggravated identity theft charges. So this guy was a representative. All those Republicans loved him. And then he got kicked out because he's a fucking felon, and Trump pardoned him. Trump pardoned the head of Binance, who was convicted of money laundering, Binance being a crypto company. Suddenly, this guy, CZ from Binance, is now advising the Trump family on crypto. But that's neither here nor there. We're more focused on insurrection, traitors, and felons. So I think we made a good case here to say we know what's going on, right? And I think, again, I divide people up, ideologists, MAGA, probably then even far-right extremism. I'm not even sure most of MAGA is Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. We have conservatives who I struggle with because there's a lot of neocons that have come over to the left because they're never Trumpers. What I struggle with is they believed in people like Newt Gingrich, who basically said, I'm going to sow discontent between the left and the right on purpose. We're not going to agree with the left, and we're always going to fight it. And we're going to create this vitriol and create this division. George Bush and Dick Cheney invading Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, I guess I can understand why the neocons liked Reagan, who did some things I like and a lot of things I don't. Maybe George H.W. Bush, the father of George W. Bush, who was basically a war hero, an amazing man. And I think he's probably closer to the middle, but he would be a conservative. So I struggle with the neocons, but sometimes you have to change your mind. Sometimes you have to decide that things are bad. And then we have the left, and then we have the far left. So people would argue that's Antifa. Now, being anti-fascist, there's nothing wrong with that because anti-fascism is anti-Mussolini, is anti-Stalin, is anti-Hitler, is anti-Mao, is anti-Trump because fascism is real. So I divide them up into those groups on ideologies, and I believe that the writing is on the wall for where we're at right now. So let's talk about ICE a little bit. We'll get into that. So I mentioned about immigration, and we're solving it the wrong way. Obviously, Biden's open border and dreamers and people looking to get in was open border, and probably why he lost the election. You need a border policy. You also need an immigration policy, and that immigration policy should be directed at corporations, and they should be penalized for circumventing the legal rules for hiring people. And then when people don't have jobs, they go away. We don't want a closed border. We definitely need immigrants. Stephen Miller would disagree with that. Stephen Miller being assistant chief of staff for the orange ass clown. But ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, we don't have any money for USAID, which is to help the world, including America, solve food insecurity, health insecurity, fight diseases, and soft power for the U.S. We don't have money for that, right? But what we have money for is we're going to appropriate another $75 billion to get more people to enforce immigration and customs enforcement. Do we need that? Do we need immigration reform or immigration policy, border policy? We do. We definitely do. On the Mexican border, especially because of drugs. On the southern border. Doesn't seem like we need much. We have the land border with Canada, the biggest unprotected land border in the world. So, and based on the way they're implementing ICE with people with masks, with no due process, accidentally arresting the wrong people, tear gassing the public, no discretion, no recourse. This is part of the philosophy of pardoning oath keepers and Proud Boys. This is part of the philosophy of enforcing the law that doesn't exist. This includes $45 billion for specifically expanding detention center capacity and approximately $30 billion for enforcement and removal operations. Sounds like an authoritarian state, doesn't it? We send National Guard in, we increase internal, so we're fighting each other. And of course, the left is murder. We only send these people to left cities, right? Even left states. I don't even know if we send them to right states with left cities. Left being blue, right being red in terms of your delineation between Republican and Democrat. But I don't care about that. What I care about is, are you following the rule of law? Do you have habeas corpus? Do you have rights? Everybody needs rights, even felons, because they may not be a felon. Or they've shipped out people that are frickin' naturalized citizens. Or they've shipped out actual citizens. Or detained actual citizens because they were brown. That seems, and Gorsuch actually backed this up. Well, yeah, I guess you can racially profile in this country, especially if you're ICE with masks on. So this all leads to that. This is where we're at. We're pardoning insurrectionists. We're pardoning traitors, again, proved by the courts. So they didn't randomly round these people up like ICE, send them to El Salvador. We put them through the system. They actually were convicted. Not rando. Frickin' Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, immigration enforcement rando roundup by color. They were rounded up because of their relation to the insurrection, and they were convicted. But now we're going to pardon them because, one, Trump wants to break down how you feel about the court systems, that it's all a fix, unless he says it's not a fix, right? He wants to break down the barriers to the separations. He wants full control. This is back to Project 2025. We want an oligarch. We want a Machiavellian. We want our Manchurian candidate that's controlled by the oligarchs and ideologues, like Kevin Roberts from Project 2025. Fuck like Tario from Proud Boys. I'm surprised he doesn't have a cabinet seat. Or Rhodes from Oath Keepers. Why don't we put him in with Hegseth, Secretary of War? Oh, I'm not a war president, but I'm going to call it the Department of War, not the Department of Defense, and I'm going to change government buildings to the names of Confederate soldiers. And we could have a whole history talk about how Reconstruction failed in the South because of bad leadership and bad presidents, and rewrote history. Well, that's what we're doing again here. So again, the playbook here is 1984. People think that it's a lesson. It is a lesson, but you can take it two ways. Double think and erasing the past is a MAGA principle. Believe it or not. As I said, my quote, as I will point out here as we end this podcast, read George Orwell's 1984. Read George Orwell's Animal Farm. Think about it from a saving democracy and the rights and liberalism, or how you could use it as a tool to control people. And you can go both ways. And then read, and all these books are on my website under What Are You Reading? Read Tim Snyder and Ann Applebaum about fascism, about authoritarianism. Read my quotes that I put on the blog page from Abraham Lincoln, from Harriet Tubman, who helped people get out of slavery. And also read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers, and understand that we had some mistakes there. When we wrote the Constitution, blacks were 3/5 vote, and that was given to the slave owners. That's why presidents came from Virginia, because they had more of a vote. Because if I'm one person with 100 slaves, now I have 100 3/5 plus myself to vote. So we need changes of that. What we don't need to do is rewrite history for those that have defrauded history. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing. So that's it for today. We had a lot of fun. We talked about the destruction of history, insurrectionists, and terrorist organizations. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. So, reminder, YouTube, Spotify, follow me, give me dislikes, give me likes. Go out there. If you're on X, sadly, you can follow me at The Way Left BV. And dig in. Dig in. People say they don't want to be political. They don't want to know about politics. I get it. You don't want to deep dive like me if you don't want to do that. You still need to understand what's going on. So you need information. So maybe it's not through this podcast. Maybe it's not through CNN or MSNBC or, God forbid, Fox. Right? But if you're going to watch Fox, watch the others, because you need to know what's going on both sides. But you have to have some transparency to it because it affects your everyday. It affects your rights. It affects your food prices. It affects your healthcare prices. It affects your state of mind. It affects your kids. It affects your parents. So be informed. And I thank you for watching this episode of The Way Left.